Let's go now to Francine in Chicago. Hi, Francine.
Hi, Patrick. Good morning to you. I'm calling about your comment on the cameras that can zoom in 100 yards away and see the colors on a checkerboard. 4 years ago, there were markings on my sidewalk. The utility companies paint things on the sidewalk when they're going to do work, and I called the city, which is the city offices, which are 10 miles away from me, to find out what they were going to do. She went to Google Earth, zoomed in on my corner, said, "Oh, yeah, I can see where you are. I can see the color of those. This is what's going to happen." And it dawned on me then, anybody, anywhere in the world can zoom in on your home and through your windows. There's nothing safe anymore. Years ago, in the late 70s and 80s, I worked on computers, and I could see the dangers that were coming. I've never owned a cell phone. I've never owned a computer. Even my TV died before the epidemic. There is no safe place anymore. GPS, somebody knows exactly where you are at every moment.
Well, your phone, well, not you because you're one of the smart people, but I and Father Rocky and everyone else walking planet Earth has a cell phone in their pocket, and that's the number one spy device that tells anyone who's interested exactly where you are at any given time.
Yes, and anyone in China can find you at any given time by Google Earth. I mean, the computers are not the wonderful thing that everybody thinks they are. They have let loose evil and lies, and they've made possible there hasn't been any privacy since the 80s.
You know what's interesting, Francine? I have a somewhat different view. I'm sympathetic to your view, but I also have a somewhat different perspective. And that is that I look at this like fire. Fire can be incredibly destructive. It can kill you and burn everything down. Or fire can be really good. It can keep you warm. It can generate electricity. There are many reasons why fire is a good thing when it's properly controlled. I look at it like that. I don't think it's entirely evil. In fact, I would say in itself it's neutral. But the technology can and often is used for evil purposes, but it can also be used for really good and helpful purposes. I'm thinking, for example, about how a physician in Tokyo can, using this technology now, he can perform an operation on a patient in Chicago in real time because of that type of technology, using the remote robotics and things that are available now, something unheard of before. And maybe the best specialist in the whole world happens to be in Tokyo, and he can't get to you in Chicago, but he can still perform the operation and save your life. I see those kinds of things and others as really beneficial. So I try to take the good and strain out the bad as best as I can. And I acknowledge the destructive power of the internet and all of these devices and technologies that we have. But also I think that there's a place for them if they're used properly and wisely. What do you think?
I agree with you that nothing is good or evil in and of itself. It's the use we put it to. It's how we intend to make use of it. I think that the computers were brought to Earth far, far before, too early in the human evolution of our thinking for us to be able to deal with it appropriately. And consequently, it's run amok. I think that even though everybody thinks that Steve Jobs was this wonderful person that came up with this great idea, I'm actually starting to think he was a tool of the devil because he made it possible for us to be lied to on a huge scale and for evil to run amok. I don't think humans were, maybe 100 years in the future, we would have had better minds and control over ourselves to be able to deal with computers. But when they came out, it was a toy. And when anything is a toy, people can be led astray very easily. And
but you know what? Exactly, let me play devil's advocate. And that's an unfortunate phrase to use, but I can't think of a better one. But what about all the good that this computing power has done for us? What about all the good that it does on a daily basis? The people's lives that are saved through the advances in things like communication technology. I don't know which particular product that Steve Jobs was involved with that you take issue with. I don't know if you're talking about the iPhone or what, but just in general, I agree with your earlier point, and that is that this is neutral in itself, but how you use it. So I'm all in favor of using technology wisely. And take a look at the Relevant Radio app, for example. I mean, it's on I guess it's getting close now to 1 million phones and tablets around the country, around the world even. So people anywhere in the world can listen to a conversation like ours. They can listen to Relevant Radio 24/7. It's the same technology, but it's used in a way now that is beneficial and hopefully salvific, as opposed to the porn or the other stuff that's out there that comes through the same medium. You see what I'm saying? In other words, the same technology can supply us with sewage, or it can supply us with, the waters of life, if that makes sense.
Oh, I agree with you, but I think the key word here is wisely. You said wisely. I don't think the human animal had progressed to the point where we had the wisdom to properly use the computer. I'm thinking, for instance, of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Okay.
They had the wisdom to use the technology to go to other worlds and bring the wisdom of an advanced civilization, as it were. There's no way that we are now an advanced civilization from what I can hear and see going on in humanity. And I just think it came out way too soon to be of proper benefit. Yes, it has benefited a lot, but I think the evil has outweighed the good.
But let me ask you this question. This is fascinating, and I'm really enjoying engaging with you on this, Francine. So first of all, thank you for raising this interesting question. But what evidence is there to suggest that we would have been wiser or smarter 100 years from now versus, say, 100 years before us, or 100 years before that? My thesis is that human nature stays the same always. It's affected by the externals, like now technology. They didn't have technology 1,000 years ago. Their technology was swords and horses and, fire to keep warm. That was their technology then. But now we're affected by our technology, but I don't think human beings are any more smart or wise or better than any other time in human history. And especially if you consider how technology is kind of degrading humanity in many ways, which I grant your point. My thinking is that the likelihood of being wiser down the road seems a lot less likely, given the way that technology is affecting people. I don't know. It's theoretical, but I find it interesting.
Well, that's my point, that I think it's actually held us back. I think if we had developed more, I don't know how to put this, if we had grown in our wisdom and become more Christian, godly, I guess, in our wisdom, and more heartfelt and more compassionate rather than, because the last 100 years, basically, it's been mechanics and the industrial age and science coming forth. But the wisdom that I think is necessary for us to properly use this technology, I still think is far in the future, and we needed to learn more as human beings. Humans have learned a lot over the past 100 years. What's good, what's not, what's bad, what we should do, what we shouldn't do, what affects us.
Do you think we're wiser now than we were 100 years ago? Because if you're taking the evolutionary approach, I think that you'd have to address that. Are we as a people wiser today in 2020 than in 1920? And were the people in 1920 wiser than the people in 1820?
I think in many ways the people in 1920 were wiser because they were dealing more with the problems at hand, whether it was the Great Depression, the wars, in a practical way. I think,
like World War I, where tens of millions of people got. I'm being not maybe a little facetious, but I don't think I buy that theory. I really don't. I don't think we are any wiser today than the people in 1920. I don't think they were any wiser than the people in 1820. I think people are people, and we're just dealing with our common humanity in any generation, and we're affected by the externals like technology. But I feel like I've interrupted you, so let me give you the last word on this, Francine.
Well, I agree with you that we're not any wiser today than we were back in 1920, and I think part of the reason, and maybe the major part of the reason, is because of the technology. I think it has kept us, I don't want to say stupid, but frivolous, perhaps, is a better word.
Well, I can agree with that. Thanks, Francine. And thank you for listening to the Relevant Radio Network on the Relevant Radio app. Thank you. I'll be right back with more right after this.
For more of The Patrick Madrid Show, visit relevantradio.com/Patrick.